A weekend for the brothers that really will have no impact on your quarterback play, but may give you some confidence for other players as we move into the fantasy playoffs. Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horowitz. Glad to be with you on Who's Hot and Who's Not, part of the CBSSports.com Fantasy Football Series. You know about the Mannings. Peyton, obviously, usually a fantasy stud, and again this weekend with his 4 touchdown passes. Eli Manning, successful because he won and executed 2 fourth-quarter touchdown drives, but they combined were outdone fantasy-wise by the McCowns. Josh McCown, 3 touchdown passes for Oakland in the big win against Denver. Younger brother Luke making the start for the Buccaneers. His first start since 2004 when he was with the Browns, and he threw for more than 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was the 4th highest rated fantasy QB this past week. Josh, the 5th. And for more, we bring in CBSSports.com senior fantasy writer Dave Richard from Miami. And Dave, obviously, it's a nice story, but not necessarily fantasy related, except for the fact that the other guys on their teams had nice days because of it. Does that give you confidence for players on the Bucs and the Raiders going forward, no matter who the QB is?
Well, you got to sort of separate the two. With Tampa Bay, we're not exactly sure if it's going to be Luke McCown the rest of the way. They're saying Jeff Garcia is going to get back into it. Either way, I'd feel pretty confident if I had Joey Galloway or Ernest Graham. These guys have pretty much emerged as must-start fantasy options. Now in Oakland, the story's different because eventually Jamarcus Russell's going to be the guy under center. But the person that you need to watch in Oakland is Jerry Porter. He's done pretty well over his last 3 games, kind of taken over for Ronald Curry. And if you need a sleeper, maybe you're weak at tight end in fantasy, heading into the playoffs, rookie Zach Miller has been involved of late. These are 2 guys, Porter and Miller, that really should be considered, especially in deeper leagues, going forward.
Miller's been a staple in that offense the last couple of weeks. You're dead right about that. Let's get into David Garrard a little bit because since coming back from his injury, only 5 fantasy quarterbacks, or at least 5 quarterbacks fantasy-wise, have put up better numbers than Garrard has the last 3 weeks, and that's Romo, Warner, Breeze, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady. So having said that, is David Garrard a guy that you want as a #1 fantasy quarterback?
The thing that I'm most impressed with about David Garrard so far is that he's spreading the ball around to a lot of different receivers. We've seen Ernest Wilford get involved. Dennis Northcutt is getting a big chunk of the action. Reggie Williams, a guy who fantasy owners don't even want to deal with because he's so inconsistent, has started to develop as a goal line and a deep threat type of option for the Jaguars. Going into the season, Jacksonville wanted to have a big passing presence. They never got it. They lost Byron Leftwich before the season started, and they leaned on Fred Taylor and Maurice Jones-Drew. Now, David Garrard has gotten the team to the point where he is a good, competent passing quarterback. He's thrown for over 200 yards in each of his last 3 games. I think he's averaging about 250 yards over his last 3 games, 5 touchdowns in that span. You said to yourself, he's ranking high as a fantasy quarterback. If you've been playing the waiver wire, maybe you've got somebody like Donovan McNabb on your team and you're looking to get a boost at quarterback, Garrard's a great way to go.
Is Garrard a better replacement, say, for a guy like John Kitna?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Kitna's kind of hit the skids over the past couple of weeks, and now he's going to be without Roy Williams for the rest of the regular season. Definitely, I would go with Garrard over Kitna.
All right, I think a lot of people will do that as well. Let's get into running backs here. And let's think about hot teams. And Minnesota Vikings are a very hot team. We'll leave Tavares Jackson out of it, but obviously they're a running team. Adrian Peterson, Chester Taylor. Peterson is back. Obviously, put him in the lineup. Where does Chester's Taylor stand in your fantasy rankings going forward?
He's a #3 fantasy running back, maybe a low-end #2 in deeper leagues. I think you can figure to see him in the top 30 in our rank list for the rest of the season. He's going to split carries with Adrian Peterson, at least for the next couple games. Maybe once Peterson gets it going again, that's when we'll see Chester Taylor sort of fall back out of the picture. Obviously, Adrian Peterson's a #1 guy. Everybody's starting him. Chester Taylor on the other side of the coin, a #3 type going forward. Figure him good for about 6 to 10 fantasy points a week.
All right, let's get a couple of other receivers here that are hot real quickly, Dave. On that same team, Sidney Rice is becoming the go-to guy for Tavares Jackson. Patrick Creighton is back in Dallas. Are those guys players you want to consider if you are in the playoffs?
Creighton, yes, is a #3. Sidney Rice is still a guy I keep on my bench just because I don't trust Minnesota's passing game enough. We saw Tavares Jackson take a step forward in his game. He did it against the Lions. He was at home. The Lions spotted him a lead. I don't really trust the Vikings passing offense yet, especially since they're just dominant against the run. There's no way Sidney Rice is going to put up any more than like 6, 7, 8 fantasy points for your team the rest of the way. Creighton, on the other hand, doesn't get a lot of yardage, does get a lot of touchdowns. That's music to fantasy owners' ears. I like him as a low-end number 2, top-end number 3 fantasy wide receiver.
Dave, do you play Nate Burleson while DJ Hackett is still not playing?
You know, I do when the matchup is right. If they're going up against a secondary that's not very good, they're going to do it this week against Arizona. I like Burleson. Deep threat type of guy. He's going to get a lot of deep looks, a lot of 20-yard receptions. If that counts big in your fantasy league, Burleson's a guy you want to use as a number 3 option.
All right, the best fantasy advice in the business. He's Dave Richard. He's in Miami, and there's plenty more where that comes from all week long. Dave, thank you very much, sir. We'll talk to you very soon.
You got it, man.
All right, folks, that'll wrap things up for this edition of Who's Hot and Who's Not. But for more, be sure to watch Move Makers and Start 'em, Sit 'em throughout the week on CBSSports.com and all over the CBS Audience Network. For Dave Richard, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care.